Sonic Dream Team was a game released in late 2023 exclusively for Apple devices for players with an Apple Arcade subscription. I didn't bother playing it for over a year because I wasn't that interested in trying it, but people have been giving me multiple requests to talk about it because apparently it's an actually good 3D Sonic game and not a cheap mobile game. And since Shadow the Hedgehog was added as a playable character in an update, I figured I may as well give the game a whirl and see what it's all about. But before I even think about it, we need to talk about how Factor 75 is the sponsor of today's video. Get fresh, ready-made meals delivered to your doorstep when you sign up with Factor. No more meal prep to spend time on, dishes to have to clean, and no more trashy fast food because Factor's chef-created meals are fresh, never frozen, and designed by dietitians to ensure every meal is nutritional. Meals come together in minutes, taking the guesswork out of what to make for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Factor even accommodates folks with a variety of different diet lifestyles, including keto, low-calorie, vegan, and vegetarian lifestyles. With more than 27 plus meal options each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy with Factor. Meal plans range from 4 to 18 meals per week. You can add more or reduce the number depending on your specific needs. You can easily modify food preferences and skip a week if you feel so inclined. So, if you want to get in on the action, use my link available in the description and the pinned comment, or use my code JReviewsFeb50 to get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box. Thanks again to Factor 75 for being the sponsor of this video. Now, without further ado, we may return to your regularly scheduled programming. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not a mobile game guy. The only games I play on my phone are Tile Triple 3D and Brick Breaker, but that's only if I'm in the passenger seat, which isn't that often. Driving everywhere has made me completely disinterested in handheld games generally, mobile games included. Phone games to me are like quick distractions to pass time, not serious games to get invested in. They're just not my thing. But to give them some credit, mobile game technology has come very far in recent years. I remember back in 2010, the phone version of Sonic 4 I played was a watered-down version of what was on the consoles, but now your iPhone can run Resident Evil 4 Remake, a game that came out on consoles like 2 years ago. I would never want to play that on a phone when I could play it on the big screen at home, but it's an option. Point being, mobile devices are now plenty capable of having full games on them even if I don't play them. As for Sonic, most of his mobile output are these quick distractions that I have no interest in, like Sonic Dash. I knew Dream Team was a step up from that because the trailers showed it was a 3D platformer, but I'm also not so thoroughly Sonic-pilled that I need to find a way to play every Sonic game the moment it comes out. But, as stated, people were curious what I thought of this game, and most shocking of all, people were very curious about its omission from my ranking of all the 3D Sonic levels last summer. I just kind of assumed we'd all agree it didn't count on the grounds of it being a mobile phone game. But that's just my bias leaking in. Sega branded 2024 as the year of Shadow, and a part of that campaign was adding him as a playable character to Sonic Dream Team. That bait was enticing enough for me to bite the hook, so now I have played through the campaign of Sonic Dream Team and I shall inform the good folks at home if I thought it was good or not. Dr. Eggman has discovered a powerful device called the Reverie, which brings people's dreams to life, but only those of pure heart, so he captures Cream the Rabbit and builds a machine that will put his world-dominating dreams into her mind as a loophole. The guardian of the Reverie, REM, is trying her best to shut Eggman out. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Rouge arrive to save the day, but are put to sleep and sent inside the machine to help REM stop Eggman. At first, Sonic is the only one awake, and he has to collect Dream Orbs to wake up Amy, and they do the same thing until you unlock the full playable cast, which is all the characters I just listed and Cream. From there, they work with REM to stop Dr. Eggman, which is the basic outline of the story, but that's also about as complicated as it gets anyway, so let's talk about how I played the game instead. I'm mostly a Windows guy. If given a choice between a Windows machine and a Mac, I'm picking Windows 100% of the time. We did have a Mac when I was a kid, but I'm just more familiar with Windows stuff at this point. I'm a PC gamer, so that's probably a given, but my phones have never not been Apples, so I already had an Apple device to play it on, which is the barrier of entry for many people. What I needed was this disgustingly overpriced official Apple USB-C AV adapter. This allowed me to plug an HDMI cable into the phone, which I could put into my capture card and get direct feed footage. But I had an issue with the audio at first. I could tell because Dancing in the Flames started blasting at a high pitch and it was really choppy. But a reset fixed that. But I must say, I think it's a crime that this song was left off of Hurry Up Tomorrow. It's an absolute banger if you ask me. But this multi-port also let me plug in a USB-A into it, which let me use my Xbox Series X controller to play the game, which is 100% compatible with Sonic Dream Team. Thanks to that, I didn't need to use any touch controls. The controls felt pretty natural with a Series X controller. In some mobile games where you use a controller in the place of touch controls, it can get really awkward since it wasn't designed to be played like that. but here it definitely was. But thankfully, you can tweak some of the settings and the options like the camera sensitivity and the turning sensitivity on the characters. Because at default, the rotation speed on the camera and the turning was too fast for my liking. The controls are pretty simple since it's a mobile game, but they'll feel familiar with anyone who's played any of the recent Sonic games, since it's based on the boost gameplay. You can run, jump, homing attack, light dash, and boost. You can't stomp or slide or quick step like all the other boost games. And that took some getting used to because of how ingrained those moves are into my muscle memory, but you do get used to it. The level design is built so that you wouldn't really need any of those anyway. And it has to be that way because again, if you were playing with touch controls, you wouldn't want to give too many options that would be cumbersome with the default setup. When playing with a controller, I liked how multiple buttons did some of the same things. Like you could boost with square like it was Sonic Unleashed through Forces, or you could just boost with R2 like Frontiers and Shadow Generations. I went with the latter since that's more comfortable. And yes, I did just use PlayStation buttons to describe things I did on an Xbox controller, but I'm a PlayStation player, so I don't really give a shit. Something that must be praised about Sonic Dream Team is that it genuinely is the first fully 3D Sonic game since Sonic 06, which was almost 20 years ago for those not keeping score. 06 was also the last 3D Sonic game that wasn't a boost game or on rails or whatever. All the games after sprinkled in 2D sections or just made most of the game 2D. The reason is that 2D levels, especially at breakneck speed, is easier to make in larger quantities than these massive 3D boost stages. It makes sense why they do it, I just think the way these 2D sections are designed is not as fun as the 3D stuff. Which is why the 3D levels of Shadow Generations ranked higher than the 2D ones in the recent ranking video I did. I don't dislike 2D Sonic, many of my favorite Sonic games are 2D, but it's nice to have a fully 3D Sonic game for a change. Perhaps that's thanks to this game being designed by Sega Hardlight, their mobile studio, and not Sonic Team, but I digress. The way the designers make these 3D stages work is by giving the player tasks to accomplish in the stage. It's not all linear high-speed action like, say, Sonic Generations. You'll have to do 3D platforming, but many times you'll run into a big room and need to collect keys or crystal shards in order to progress. Along the way, you'll put the different characters' abilities to use and jump around enemies and such. It plays like a boost game and has the physical space to allow for it to work, but taking it slow is encouraged at the same time, since the stages have a lot more verticality and exploration than the average boosting Sonic level. The levels kinda remind me of Sonic Colors in a way, because there are 4 worlds in Sonic Dream Team with 3 main stages and a boss. But then the game gets more runtime through giving each of these 3 main stages extra missions where you can play a segment of the same stage just with a stipulation. Like how in Sonic Colors you'll play Tropical Resort Act 1, but then Act 4 is... You know, someone once called me out for the fact that I use the same example for this in literally every video where this point about Sonic Colors gets brought up, so just because of that person, I'm gonna change it. It's like how in Sonic Colors you'll play Aquarium Park Act 1, which is a full stage, but then Act 3 is a slightly remixed chunk from Act 1. I am oddly proud of myself for finding a new example. The level progression reminds me of Sonic Colors, but then in-game, the activities you're doing remind me more of the 3DS Sonic Boom games. Those games had levels you went through once, but in order to get through the game, you need to come back to stages and use the different character abilities to find collectibles that allow you to further progress. It's like those games, just without the part where it sucks and isn't fun to play. That's because Dream Team doesn't make you scour levels for collectibles, you just play new missions in each level as different characters who all play basically the same, but with their own gimmicks to make them worthwhile. And that's another thing you can give Dream Team credit for. It's the biggest playable cast in a 3D Sonic game since 06 yet again, sporting 7 playable characters. Credit to the Sonic series, we really have come a long way. I mean, 06 had almost the whole cast playable, but they all sucked, and some of them were sub-functional like Amy or Knuckles. Critics and fans treated the characters like they were the issue, not the terribly unfinished gameplay they were attached to. But either way, the series then became focused on Sonic as the only major playable character for over 15 years, some games even using that regression as a perk in the marketing. But now, with Frontiers' Final Horizon DLC, Dream Team, and Shadow Generations, we really are in a new age for the series when it comes to giving the other characters time to shine in gameplay. All you nearly need to do to have it work is do what all 3 of these games do. Just make the extra characters play like Sonic, just with a slightly different gimmick. Which is what they originally did when many of these characters first appeared, they just lost the plot later on. In Dream Team, every character has the same basic controls. That goes for running, jumping, homing, attacking, boosting, all that stuff. But the cast of 6 are divided into 2 groups. Those groups have special abilities that are shared between the 2 that are different from the others. For example, Sonic and Amy play the same as everyone else, but they can do the Lightspeed Dash and a Trail of Rings and reach hidden areas with it. Only downside of them is that they can do this Air Dash attack, which can send you flying into the abyss, since it happens so quickly and some platforms are tiny. But Sonic was still my main go-to character, because he's the main character after all. Tails and Cream play the same as the rest, but they can fly after jumping. And I like how this handles. There's a meter that caps how high they can go, but the descent isn't immediate. They're good characters to play as in platforming sections. Knuckles and Rouge can glide after a jump and climb specific walls. Sure, climbing every wall is cooler, but it's fine that it works like this because it keeps the pace of the game up, and I'm also imagining it's simpler for the designers to just make only certain wall segments climbable. But the climbing speed at default is kinda slow, and the glide's descent is too immediate, so they were my least favorite to play as. Some stats for the character classes can be upgraded, like longer flight for the flying characters, but I didn't nab many of the unlockables myself. But yeah, you'll be playing the first world as Sonic and see areas you clearly need Tails or Knuckles to get through, and that naturally gets you thinking about replaying the stages. But you have extra incentive to do so because of how progression is gated behind collecting Dream Orbs. One Dream Orb is given to you for clearing a mission, and in the main act of each world, collecting all 5 red star rings gives you an orb as well. When you see you don't have enough of them, you can go back to earlier levels and use the characters you've unlocked to clear missions you couldn't play before and get those Dream Orbs that way. Missions are never tedious or complicated, so it doesn't bother me to get the most out of the game like this. But then there's also Shadow, who was added in a recent update. Despite the hype, I must say, he was easily my least favorite character to play as. He was just so awkward to use. He can stop time with Chaos Control, but to do it you need to be totally stationary, and so many times I just activated the boost with him by accident trying to stop time, and that got me killed. And he has this short dash attack after jumping which you're locked into upon activation, but the distance is pitiful. It's trying to do the things that Shadow could do in Shadow Generations, but it really isn't that great here. Also, unlocking him takes too much effort. To play as Shadow, you need to do these extra missions available from the options menu. Each mission gives you 25 experience points, and you need 325 to unlock Shadow. I was like, he's not that fun anyway. These missions where you get to sample his gameplay showed me that. So I didn't unlock him for the campaign. Doing 13 missions sounds simple, but I didn't feel like doing it because of the game they're in. I would say I enjoyed the campaign of Sonic Dream Team, but I didn't love it either, and that was because of the levels. Thematically, I've never been into the whole floating platform blocks design idea, but this is a mobile game set in a dream world, so I can accept it here. But the levels feel too samey to play, and relied way too heavily on grind rails. The levels do have a lot of different paths and routes, sometimes accessible via grind rails, but grinding on rails is so automated and happens so often in Dream Team that it makes the levels feel kinda bland. There's a green level, there's a factory, there's a nightmare maze thing, and an Eggman City. I remember the level themes off the top of my head, but each individual stage is kind of a blur, because despite having good gimmick ideas and all being relatively new level tropes, the overuse of automation throughout the game made me not want to engage with the post-game. But like I said, I enjoyed the game, and that's because it has plenty enough action platforming to enjoy, and the game is ultimately not long enough for the things I don't like to drag the experience down. Well, there are things I definitely didn't like about the game, but they're not things that affect the gameplay. For example, I thought the music was really annoying. I don't know how to describe it, but this is the kind of game music you hear a lot these days where it's like really bouncy and energetic, but not that catchy or memorable. It really grinds my gears when listening to it, so I didn't like that. But then, the story is an utter nothing burger. As stated before, the basic premise I gave earlier is the whole story. Nothing really changes or happens in it. But to be honest with you, I was half expecting Sonic to be like, "This reminds me of the last time me, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles got sucked into the dream world. Wonder what Lumina Flowlight is up to." That seems to be the kind of writing people are into these days. But if you like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Cream, and Rouge interacting with each other, you will perhaps find this story entertaining. For me, it was pretty much white noise. What I do want to talk about is the models and animation. Most of the cutscenes are static image, comic panel type presentation. It looks fine. I don't mind that. I instead wanted to bring attention to the brief in-game cutscenes that are fully animated that are a treat.
Ugh, I've heard of falling asleep, but that was ridiculous.
I am looking after your friends, but they will need your help.
The cutscenes in Sonic Forces and Sonic Frontiers were so bad that seeing this game when it came out actually made me sad. Like, damn, we could get Sonic games that are animated like this on consoles, but instead we get this shit. However, Shadow Generations came out last year and actually finally improved. So I have faith that good animation might become something that we get more often. No doubt thanks to the increased budget these games have these days because of the movies and because of people criticizing them before. I just never really got the people who say we should accept whatever Sega gives us because it could be worse. Like, yeah, sure, it could be, but I want it to be the best, though. So I'm glad our voices have been heard. I just hope this also gives them enough motivation to redesign the Sonic cast as well. People praised the art and renders from this game, and I can see why. It's not because they look good. They really kinda don't. In-game, the models look fine, but the art of them for promotional materials look pretty mid and lifeless, but it doesn't feel that way to a lot of fans because at least it's new. Sorry for the side tangent, but seriously, Sega has been using the same models for all promotional renders and in-game models for almost 2 decades, and they look so old and outdated it defies comprehension. And somehow, the game model for Sonic, despite being the same model, gets worse every time you see it. Uglier colors, a worse and less defined silhouette, looks bad at different angles, and the list goes on. Nintendo periodically updates the look of the Mario cast at least once a decade, so their mascots are still looking fresh and up to date. Sega does not do that. I wish they did, because every new character model in Shadow Generations looks pretty good. Like I said, that was a tangent, but the new renders in this game seemed like a good time to talk about that. So let's go back to the things I didn't like about Dream Team that I would love to be changed in later games. The voice acting? I'll be honest, it's really bad. I try to be nice when talking about acting since there are so many factors at play like direction and casting and all that, but this game shows that many of these characters just need new voices and or the direction needs a serious overhaul. And no, this isn't me just saying I want the actors from when I was a kid to come back. That ship has sailed, circumnavigated the globe, and bought the t-shirt to prove it. This group of actors have been these characters in English longer than any of the previous casts combined. They're here to stay, clearly. And besides that, I'm not saying bad acting in Sonic is new, or started when these new voices did. You could probably count the amount of Sonic games with consistently good voice acting across the board on like one hand. But this one was just not good, and here's why. So many of these characters just don't sound like characters, they sound really stilted and bored. Plus, many of these characters aren't allowed to have a range of emotions either. In the games, the characters must always speak in the same tone of voice for almost every line. For example, Rouge must say every sentence in a weirdly seductive tone of voice, even if it makes the line sound really oddly delivered as a result.
Sure, but he's such a brute. No class or tact at all.
And again, this isn't me complaining it's not the same voice as the one I heard when I was a kid. I'm literally comparing it in my mind to Sonic Freeriders, where these actors debuted in 2010, and so many of them sound so much more natural.
I just feel bad for everyone watching. This won't even be close.
This game confirms that the whole deeper Sonic voice from Frontiers is what they're gonna do for him in games, you know, where he sounds really low. But then, for the social media, he'll go back to the voice he used to have! But again, the early games for Roger just sound more natural, I don't know.
Feeling good! I'm looking forward to seeing the sights as I tear through such a beautiful town!
Knuckles just sounds like Guy. No texture or character to his voice in the games. I guess I got used to that, but Idris Elba's amazing performance in the film franchise makes it harder to not notice how lacking his character feels in the games. Tails is a direct comparison because it's the same actress in the movies, and she's even said that a movie script just lets you have the wider range of emotions as an actor that a game script does not. For Sonic and Tails, it's a direction thing, because in every other work I've seen most of these actors in, they're great. So I just wish the Sonic games had more life and range in them. But for characters like Rouge or, God almighty, Dr. Eggman, just give us a new take on these characters. They sound so bad. Mike Pollock as Eggman just sounds dry as hell in this game, like he's going through the motions.
You won't deny me, Guardian! No, the Dreamweaver's power should have been neutralized!
There's a big Twitter trend going on right now, people calling for him being recast over his Zionism and just being a completely snarky asshole to random Sonic fan kids for no reason. Some say art from artist. But I say, he's not nice. And I don't think he's given us a good performance as Dr. Eggman since Sonic Lost World, which was 12 years ago. Like, remember when he used to sound good?
Now I just need to harness its power. Eggman Land will finally come to be! Ah, Sonic, that's a good look for you. Festive. So long, friend!
I remember when we all used to pretend his more low-key performance in 06 was bad, but I'll take that any day over this because he had, like, nuance to him and he sounded like a villain.
A pleasure to meet you at last, Princess of Soliana. I am Dr. Eggman. I've come here to obtain the secret of the Flames of Disaster from you.
Just compare him in the original dub of Generations to the redub in the recently released remaster, and it's night and fucking day.
If you would be so kind as to explain, Gentleman Genius Dr. Eggman from the future. It will be my pleasure, most excellent and efficacious Dr. Eggman of the past. If you would be so kind as to explain, Gentleman Genius Dr. Eggman from the future. It will be my pleasure, most excellent and efficacious Dr. Eggman of the past.
That was another massive tangent, but I just thought the cutscenes and story were made even more white noise when I just think the characters don't sound right at all. That's basically the only thought I had while watching the story because there really wasn't much going on. I guess it was nice to see Cream again. She's not been in a Sonic story as a main character since Free Riders, and that was 15 years ago. It's just nice to have a cute side character who is really useful and helpful, but the other characters still need to look after. I've always thought she was a great addition to the cast. But having said all that, the game culminates in Eggman's imaginary city. I have to say, the visual theming is kind of interesting. It looks more like a utopia than the nightmare world that the real Eggman land was in Sonic Unleashed. This looks more like a Ratchet & Clank level. But maybe, just maybe, in Eggman's dreams, this is what Eggman Land is meant to be. He thinks he's bringing utopia, but when it actually existed, it was hell on Earth. That could be interesting if that was remotely what anyone on the art team was thinking about, but it doesn't really matter. The final level was alright. It put pretty much every skill you've learned to the test, and that's all you can really ask for in a final stage. This level also had more raw platforming and less grind rails, which made it the most mechanically compelling stage in the game. Unfortunately, the final boss leaves a lot to be desired. In fact, the word boss was doing a lot of heavy lifting there. None of the other bosses are super impressive or anything, you just have to recognize the pattern and attack, but the last one isn't even a fight. You avoid it as each character and then you win. The day gets saved and everyone's happy, the end. Despite my doing a huge complaint session at the end of the video about the voice acting, I don't want to take away from the fact that I thought Sonic Dream Team was a decent game. As I said, I'm pretty biased against mobile games a lot of the time. I'm not interested in them, and yet this game actually impressed me. I thought the visuals and animations were appealing, and the gameplay from the console games was smoothly translated to a mobile game, and the levels give you a lot to explore for, even with the less than stellar automated bits. As a handheld Sonic spin-off, I'd say this is a pretty good supplement to the console games. It's sure as hell better than Sonic Rivals or Sonic Chronicles, games I played for hours as a kid despite them not being that good. I'd still play a Sonic Advance or a Sonic Rush over this, but it's a neat game. What's a shame is that, for the moment, most people aren't going to play this game. It's Apple Arcade exclusive, so you need to have an Apple device and a subscription. I could see this game doing pretty well on Steam or as a Nintendo Switch eShop title, but it's currently locked to Apple stuff. Having said that though, those are my thoughts on Sonic Dream Team. I thought it was a pretty nice game. Probably won't play it again, but I enjoyed it while I played it. Now we just wait for the new Sonic Racing game to come out, so that should be fun, I hope. Until then, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.